welcome back. Tonight, we walk the marble halls of Rome, not to follow emperors, but to hear the quieter voices behind the power. In the Senate, influence was everything, more than bloodlines and louder than armies. And yet, beyond the curule chairs stood those in shadows, clients, scribes, freedmen, shaping Rome without ever leading it. This isn't a story of dominance, but of presence, of what it means to belong, to be seen, and to matter without a title. But first, if stories like this speak to you, please like the video. And if you're new here, subscribe. And in the comments, tell us where you're listening from and what reminds you that even outside the spotlights, your voice still carries weight. Now, let us begin with the life and identity of women in ancient Rome. The life of a woman in ancient Rome was not one of ease. From the very moment you were swaddled in cloth and placed in your mother's arms, your future came pre-scripted, modest, obedient, and pure. Your cries barely reached the walls of the domus before society had already weighed your worth. Not by your voice, your mind, or your laugh, but by how softly you walked, how little you challenged, and how well you faded into the expectations others carved for you. In ancient Rome, being born a girl wasn't just a fate, it was a lifelong performance. And the audience was everyone, neighbors, priests, in-laws, even market vendors. They all had opinions on how well you carried yourself. You weren't meant to stand out in public life. That stage was reserved for the men. But behind the curtains, that's where you quietly shaped history, one domestic decision at a time. Your value lay not in your ambitions, but in your virtues. Modesty taught you to speak gently, dress plainly, and never let your gaze linger too boldly. Castious chastity was more than a personal virtue. It was a family asset, something to guard as fiercely as gold. And then came obediencia, the quiet expectation that your father ruled first, and then your husband after. There was no ladder to climb, no glass ceiling to break, just a long hallway of locked doors, and a key that only fit from the other side. But don't mistake that for weakness. You learned early that survival meant strategy. You played the long game, wielding influence from within the walls of your household. The domus was your arena, your battlefield. You weren't speaking in the Senate, but you were whispering wisdom into the ears of the men who did. Women like Cornelia, mother to the famed Gracchi brothers, weren't praised for rebellion. They were remembered for wisdom, patience, and the quiet power of reputation. Her grace became her son's legacy. And in Rome, reputation was currency. A whispered rumor could break a family. A glance too long, a tunic too colorful, laughter heard from the wrong place. These were not minor missteps. They were cracks in the marble statue of your family's social standing. One slip, and it wasn't just you who paid the price. Your daughters became less marriageable. Your husband lost alliances, and your family name gathered dust. Recovering from that, a slow climb through generations of good behavior. You watched the world from the sidelines, but you learned its rules. You observed the politics of neighbors, read faces like scrolls, and translated emotion into action. You may not have had a seat in the forum, but you controlled the mood of the home, the rituals, the rhythm, the respect. And make no mistake, the home was Rome. Your daily choices set the tone for your family's values. You guided religious rites, managed slaves or servants, and maintained the moral compass of the household. You could not cast a vote, but you cast your influence like a stone in still water. Quiet, but far-reaching. Some, like Livia Drusilla, wife of Augustus, perfected the art of silent power. Her voice echoed through the empire, not with speeches, but with softly spoken counsel in private chambers. And the expectations, they weren't flexible. You were warned not to laugh too loud or speak too freely. You learned that self-control was your crown, and anything flashy, emotional, or expressive was a threat to it. Even fashion was political. The Lex Oppia, passed during a time of crisis, limited your jewelry and dress. Rome didn't want its women glittering. It wanted them disciplined. Class only changed the scenery, not the script. If you were wealthy, you had tutors, silks, perhaps a triclinium decorated with imported mosaics. But your virtue still mattered more than your wit. You were expected to arrange marriages, supervise festivals, and keep your stola spotless. If you were poor, you worked in the market stalls, stirred pots of lentils, carried water down dusty alleys. But modesty always still followed you like a shadow. You learned how to move through this world carefully and cleverly. Hosting rituals became a way to earn respect. Teaching your children about ancestors reinforced tradition. And when gossip flickered through the alleys like wildfire, you kept your name unsung. You formed alliances with other women, mothers, cousins, freed women, quiet networks where warnings were shared over laundry and advice passed through whispered prayers at shrines. You didn't need the spotlight. You were the scaffolding holding it all together. Each morning began not with freedom, but with a checklist of expectations. Yet within those narrow bounds, you found space to lead, to love, to leave a mark that history rarely acknowledges, but could never exist without it. A day in the life of a working woman and enslaved laborers in ancient Rome. You wake not to sunlight, but to the shuffle of tired feet and the distant calls of the marketplace crows. The room is dim, shared with others, packed with straw mats and the sour warmth of bodies pressed too close together. This is no noble villa. You don't rise to silk sheets and perfumes. You rise because you must. Your tunic is rough spun linen, patched so many times you've memorized each threadbare spot. You tighten the cloth around your waist with a piece of cord, hair tied back without ornament. You don't own mirrors. What would be the point? Today will leave you sweat-soaked and blistered like every other day. You're out before the sky warms. The street stones are slick, the morning dew and city grime. Your feet carry you to the Tiber's edge, where laundry women have already begun their rhythm. You join them, knuckles raw against soaked fabric, the river's cold mist seeping into your bones. Another woman nearby hauls sacks for a baker, and a third mixes mortar for a mason. You envy neither, but they envy you just the same. When not working someone else's job, you're working your own, though no one pays you for that. You fetch water from the fountain, dodging impatient carts and careless elbows. You stroke the hearth with bits of wood and leftover charcoal scraps. You stir barley gruel in a cracked pot, feeding your children. You tend cuts and coughs and old herbs passed down by memory. Your life is a system of borrowed time and unpaid debts. You rarely speak freely around those who employ you, but among your kind, there's wit, grit, and whispered laughter. You trade gossip and warnings like coin, building bonds with women who understand what it means to survive when nothing is guaranteed. In a world that denies you control over wealth or laws, you rule through resilience. Enslaved, not silent, the life in the shadows of the domus. Your day begins long before the voice stirs in the villa. You are already dressed, already moving. The matron sleeps, but your work begins without her gaze. You are property, your name, if they use it, spoken like a command. But among other servants, you're something more, the one who knows the kitchen best, or who can weave an entire tunic without a knot, or soothe a teething child with a hummed lullaby passed down from a mother you barely remember. The villa breathes with wealth, marble halls, bronze mirrors, imported oils. You see all of it, touch all of it, yet own none of it. Your fingers polish silver cups for guests who will never learn your face. You light the fire for meals you'll never get to taste. Your role is dictated by rank. The nursemaid rocks the infant, her arms aching as she hums the same lullaby for hours. The kitchen slave chops herbs, checking her pace as an overseer passes by. The personal attendant, always near the mistress, carries baskets to the baths, arranges hairpins, and whispers reminders the lady will take credit for. A senior servant, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, keeps everyone in line, her authority carved from years of silent service. You are careful with your voice, careful with your steps, but in quiet corners you speak freely. You exchange jokes, mimic your masters, mutter about aches, and dream in fragments. Some slaves were born here, others were taken in war. Some remember freedom, others only know this. Even religion doesn't shield you, though you too kneel at the household altar. You place flowers before Lair's statues, whispering prayers for protection, not from the gods, but from punishment. Festival days may bring special foods, but not freedom. Still, you participate fully, for appearance is part of your survival. A city divided, yet bound by the hands of women. Across the class divide, morning rituals blur together. Gods honored, homes tended, children fed. But how they unfold reveals who holds the power and who merely preserves it. By afternoon, the villa fills with visitors or tutors. Matrons dictate letters, direct the cook, and manage dowries. Middle-class wives inspect stalls and balance budgets, counting every coin. But you're still working. The sun hasn't even hit its peak. You might be pressing olives, stirring boiling starch, or soothing a master's child while your own waits elsewhere. There's no break, only a shift in tasks. As twilight creeps in, families gather. The elite recline, discussing dowries and political news. Others huddle over cracked bowls of lentils. In your home, or what counts as one, you piece together dinner from scraps, exhausted but alive. You listen to laughter upstairs, and you hear your neighbors trading stories just outside. Both echo through you in different ways. Evening ends with prayers, always the prayers. But for you, it's not ritual, it's hope, small and stubborn. You don't control estates or write law, but you influence in subtler ways, with a warning passed to someone else that saves her from a beating, with a clever barter that stretches the week's meals, with stories you tell your children so they remember something better. Where others see obedience, you've mastered strategy. Where they see silence, you've built a world of whisper networks and unspoken alliances. Your legacy won't be etched in stone, but in the lives of those who remember your strength. You live inside the lines drawn for you, but you've made those lines flexible. And in that bending, there's something radical. Despite the limits, despite the bruises, and despite the burdens, you are still here, still shaping, still standing, and still surviving. The quieter battles and the inner struggles of the pursuit of legacy. You smile at the dinner guest, pouring wine and steady hands, your words modest, your laughter just warm enough. But within you, something stirs that no one at the table can see. Behind every polite gesture is calculation. Behind every act of service, strategy. In a world that rarely names your desires, you still carry them. From the moment you could speak, you were told what you would become: a wife, a mother, a matron of virtue. And so, you play the role, gracefully, dutifully, endlessly. But as you manage the household, plan the meals, whisper a warning into your husband's ear, or slip a suggestion into your father's plan for your brother's marriage, you realize this too is power. Quiet, cloaked, but real. In this marble villa, where men make laws and speak of conquest, you practice diplomacy in linen. You remember who praised whom at last year's Saturnalia, which neighbor's cousin needs a favor, and how best to flatter a senator's wife before asking for her son's tutor. The world expects you to obey. You become a master of influence instead. But not every moment is political. Some days you rise before the household stirs and tend the family shrine. You light the incense. You whisper a prayer, not for Rome, not for your husband's career, but for your own heart. You pray for peace or strength, or simply the ability to feel like more than a shadow in someone else's legacy. You find solace in sacred routines, in the weaving room, with only the soft clack of the loom to keep you company. Your hand moves, but your mind travels. You think of your child, how she watched you spin thread yesterday, her small eyes curious. You remember your mother's voice, passing down the same skill. In this unbroken line of women, there is something holy, a story told not in books, but in fiber, food, and feeling. These domestic arts become your canvas. Each measured fold of fabric becomes a signature, not of vanity, but of endurance. The tunic you make for your child, the linen cloth embroidered for the altar, the meals you prepare with care, even when no one says thank you. These are your monuments, small but sturdy. You teach without a classroom. You counsel without a pulpit. in whispered conversations while folding laundry, in laughter shared over work. You pass on the knowledge that matters most, how to endure disappointment without losing your soul, how to speak when silence is expected, and how to survive with grace when grace is the only armor allowed. Still, there are nights when your mind wanders. You wonder who you could have been in another world, one where your words stood beside men's in court, one where your name held weight in public, not just within household walls. You envy the freedwoman who buy her own stall in the market. You admire the vestal who walks with guards, immune to a father's rule. But mostly, you carry your longing quietly, folded beneath layers of duty. You write, if not with pen, then with legacy. You ensure that the girl born under your roof learns courage before modesty, wit before compliance. You remind her that being overlooked is not the same as being powerless. And when the time comes to leave this life, you carve your name into the smallest stone with pride. In the empire that claimed to rule the world, Roman women lived within invisible borders, lines etched by law, tradition, and expectation. Their names rarely appear in the grand annals of history, their voices absent from the speeches that survive, and yet their presence shaped every corner of Roman life. Whether noble or enslaved, merchant's wife or street-side laborer, every woman navigated a world not built for her freedom. Her body was watched, her choices were restricted, her role was prescribed long before she understood it. But within those confines, women found spaces, narrow but sacred, where they could plant something of themselves. They learned to rule from the shadows, directing families through suggestion, alliances through marriage, and households through skill. They built informal economies of trust and memory, whispered knowledge passed hand to hand through generations. Their power was rarely public, but always present, quietly shaping outcomes, protecting what could be saved, and resisting what could not. Daily rituals became their resistance. A loom became a place of pride. A well-tended hearth became a legacy. A prayer uttered at dawn became a cry for something better. By stepping into the life of a Roman woman, even just for a moment, you see what history often overlooks: the struggle behind the smile, the choice behind the chore, and the hope behind the habit. These women, anonymous to history's spotlight, made the very rhythms that held Rome all together. Their legacies, like the looms they mastered, were built not to be loud, but to keep going.